Hello, everyone. This is Ed Brenniger, and welcome to the Eddie Network podcast. My guest today is Virgil Smith, old friend and colleague of mine. And Virgil has had a stellar history in the world of journalism, and we're going to talk about journalism today. Welcome, Virgil. Give us a little thumbnail sketch of who you are and what you've done over your life.
Well, greetings, Ed. Thank you for the opportunity to be on your podcast. So, Virgil Smith, about to be 73 years old. I've had a 50-year career in media, which would include, Ed talked about journalism, but it would include broadcast, publishing, which is the traditional newspaper, along with digital platforms. I've worked my way up from the very bottom to president and publisher of two newspapers, one in California, the Stockton Record, and also where I met Ed in North Carolina, the Asheville Citizen-Times, and spent the last 10 years working for Gannett headquarters, overseeing talent management, talent acquisition, diversity, and inclusion. At the conclusion of my career in 2015 with corporate, started a little boutique consulting business with just a few clients, the largest client being Fox News, the Maynard Institute, the Asian American Journalists Association, and also along the lines, I certified myself as a executive coach, and I've been coaching various professionals, primarily in media. Been married for 52 years, 3 children, and happy to be on Ed's podcast.
I'm happy to have you here too. And you were one of the first people to advance my career as a consultant and as a coach, and all those years ago, 25 years ago. And I'm grateful for you. And we talked a lot about journalism back then. We talked a lot about newspapers, and it's changed considerably in that time. And I know it's kind of disintermediated now. It's no longer kind of the resident of a group of people who are professional journalists. It's kind of spread out, and it's kind of lots of amateur journalists and podcasters and all of that. So how do you, as a professional person in media and journalists, look at that change that's taken place over these years?
Well, with some disappointment and also some excitement. Let me talk about the disappointment first. The disappointment is newspaper companies, for the most part, were cash cows. We're talking about profit margins anywhere from 15, 30, 40%. That is a lot of money that was made by newspapers. The sad part about that is it's really a failure of leadership. And what I mean by that is the leaders at the time were more focused on quarterly earnings than they were on innovation and new ideas. Newspapers companies had the resources to start the Google, start the Facebook, and to disrupt their own business, especially in the classified part of the business, which is automotive advertising, employment advertising, and real estate. That's a cash cow for advertising, along with retail with the major department stores. And so the journalists, they've always been committed professionals who don't make a lot of money for the most part. There are exceptions, but overall, they were not the highest paid people in the organization, but they produced quality content, and they did more than just produce the content. They engaged with the communities. They held public officials, elected officials accountable to the residents of those various communities. And as a result of that lack of vision and leadership, newspapers have taken a fall. And it's not been a recent event. It's been happening over the years, since the 90s. All I remember, and other folks who've been in the business, they will tell you, there's been a tremendous loss of talent. consistently, regularly laying off people, including journalists, to the point where I'll just give you an example. In Asheville, we had 60 plus folks in the newsroom gathering news. And, Asheville is not a large market, circulation 60 to 80,000. I would guess the paid circulation is probably around 10,000, if that much. That is a tremendous loss of readers. If they've got 5 to 7 reporters, I'd be surprised. And they are a microcosm of what you see across the country. The exceptions being the major players like the New York Times, the Washington Post, the LA Times, probably not as significant, Wall Street Journal. Those are your major newspaper organizations. In terms of where we are now, we have Google, we have Facebook, and you remember the days when we didn't have those platforms.
Yeah, I do.
And now, as you alluded to in your introduction, anyone who has a Twitter account, a Facebook account, LinkedIn, a podcast, YouTube, they can be journalists. They can produce content to a targeted audience that can go viral. And with the artificial intelligence AI coming into play, there's a lot of uncertainty of where we go from here, not only in the media, specifically newspapers, but also in terms of academia, medicine, government. So many areas, technology, are going to be impacted by this. It's unknown. It reminds me of the days of when the internet was being discovered back in the early 90s, when I was one of those pioneers. It was one of my assignments to investigate and build websites back in the 90s. And I know at the time, people simply did not believe the power of the internet. I recall in a meeting at the Reno Gazette-Journal, I had gone to Stanford to learn how to do HTML and to build a website for the Reno Gazette-Journal. I came back and I told the management team at a retreat that this will be the greatest evolution, technological change that we've ever seen in our lifetime. And people kind of laughed, at that. But it has been, as you know. And so fast forward 10 years from now, with artificial intelligence, younger people who have been using mobile devices since they were 3 or 4 years old, it's going to be a fascinating place to be. Information will be there, but you're not going to have the conglomerates, in my view, controlling it, because, media, and I left out this very, very important point. Media is a protector of democracy. And as you look at the polarization we have here in the United States, and this polarization in different parts of the world, here in the States, a lot of that is due to the lack of having media that does the investigative reporting, that holds people accountable. Thank God for the New York Times, and the work that they have done. And I'm not talking about from a political standpoint, but they saw the vision, they pivoted, and they have more digital subscribers than they have paid newspaper subscribers. Right. So they prepared themselves for that change. What it looks like going forward, I don't have enough tomorrows probably to see how it's going to evolve, but there's definitely going to be a significant shift. And hopefully foundations like the one I represent and others around the country will invest in these investigative online newspapers who are trying to do that work to hold folks accountable and protect democracy. It's a long-winded answer, Ed.
No, it's not. It's great. It's just this could be a nice 3-hour conversation, because I think there's so much to go into that. I recall the 2 times you had me come to speak to your top 50 managers, and in both those times I talked about the paper being the center of the community, a place that the community goes to find out what's going on in the community. And I don't know how they responded to that. But if I said that in probably every paper in the country, they would, in the late '90s, they would have it would have fallen on deaf ears. And then within a decade, we had Facebook that had become that very thing, and become the center of a community, but not representing that local community. It's I see that's where the challenge is. But I think I think all these things go in cycles. And so I think it becomes very broad and very, very disintermediated. I keep coming back to that word. But then all of a sudden it'll become consolidated more, but it'll start at the local level. And we'll see more and more people talking about what's happening in their local community. I see it here in North Wilkes-Barre. I see that happening. It's not by the paper. It's by group chats on Facebook and things like that. I guess my point is the future going to be one where the individual person begins to see that they have a voice that they didn't have before, and that they have a way of speaking. And the question is, how do they speak on behalf of the community and for the nation and for the welfare of the whole? How do we begin to push that sort of in that sort of direction?
I think that's happening now. I mean, when you think about, just think about law enforcement. I mean, who would have dreamed that law enforcement would be required to wear cameras, because the public, the general public, they, with their phones, they are all reporting on what's taking place. And so you're starting to see some of that. You're also seeing it, you mentioned Facebook, and, I throw Instagram in there as well, that people are forming their own groups. They're sharing information. So it's not that people are not informed. They are informed. However, it's a difference between being informed and having a local news organization who is committing resources to covering school board meetings, to covering, the committee meetings at, state legislatures and those kinds of things, to go to city council meetings and hold council members or county commissioners accountable. And ironically, I'll just speak about Asheville and the Buncombe County area. Now, it's been many years since I left there as publisher, but I still get phone calls. And when I run into people, they talk about how the newspaper has no presence, that no one's covering the deep stories. John Boyle.
Yeah.
John Boyle, he left the Citizen Times. I'm not sure if you're aware of that. He left the Citizen Times and he joined this group called Ash Vegas. And is that the right word?
Yeah, it's
I'm not sure about
that. Yeah.
Okay. So they just did this 12-part series. 12-part series on downtown Asheville. They covered it from every angle that one could imagine. And as a result, I just read earlier this week or last week where the city council, they're making changes based on that report to improve downtown Asheville. It's amazing to hear that, because when you and I lived there, it was thriving, it was robust, and it was for many years after we left. But hard times have hit it.
Yeah.
And as a result of the investigative reporting by the folks who lead this voluntary organization, it's made a change. Now, the people who lead it, a lot of them are retired journalists, some of them Pulitzer winners, so they're high quality individuals. John Boyle is one of the best columnists you're going to find anywhere in any local newspaper.
Right.
And so that shows that a change can be made. And I agree, things go in cycle. So maybe that's, they've got something with the new model. The Texas Tribune out of Texas and what they've done with their online newspaper. Carolina Public Press, what they've done in terms of investigative news around state government in North Carolina. So those are new models that are going to evolve. Hopefully they'll get the investment. The nonprofit model is one that's being evaluated, for news. So two things. Let me just close with this. Individuals and groups and they are informing each other now. They're staying abreast. They see something, it's on YouTube, it's out there, it's Facebook and Facebook Live. And so people are doing that. From an organizational standpoint, you're getting these groups, these online folks, and As Vegas, they're online as well, who are starting to do some of this investigative reporting that needs to be done. Because the truth of the matter is, we have to hold not only local, but national officials accountable for telling the truth. Because I've never in my lifetime seen such bald-faced lies to the public.
Yeah.
And half the country believes it. So anyway, I'll stop there.
Well, I totally agree with you. So if there is a group of 20 young people in their 20s right now who are looking at doing this kind of journalism, and I know some people have called it citizen journalism. I've heard that term used. What would your advice be to them about how they develop themselves and how they should position themselves in terms of the larger scope of what journalism is? Because I'm asking because you have spent a lot of your last decade training young journalists and young managers of journalism in journalism. So, what do you have to say to them?
Well, one of the skill sets that they have that long-term journalists may not be as skilled, but they've kind of closed the gap, is they have the skill set of technology. Not only current technology, but technology that's on a cutting edge that's coming, to embrace and use that technology. The other thing is, I would tell them to be fearless, to follow the news, to report the news, and at some point it's got to be paid for. They're not going to work for free, and so I would also encourage them to get funders. Individuals would provide funding for them. I know foundations will provide funding for them, and they've got to stay committed to the truth. If they truly believe in democracy, they truly have a love for not only the country, but for their fellow man. It's doable. I mean, Facebook started in Mark Zuckerberg's garage, for Christ's sake. Same with Microsoft. And so follow your vision, follow your passion, stay with it, find some like-minded visionary people to work with you, bring along some old people who, when I say old people, I'm speaking of people who are more experienced, for some wisdom to help you along the way as well. Because one of the things about young folk is they go out and do good work is they don't know what they don't know. And, bring along an old head who can help you navigate, some of those areas that you don't know. So anyway, I don't know if that's helpful for them, but that's what I throw out off the top.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. What you're pointing to is that the people who are the young people who are going to excel are going to be those who understand that there's an intergenerational aspect to their career and their purpose. And the more they're able to connect with people who are older and eventually when connect with people that are younger, then they become much more adept at understanding what's going on. Their sense of awareness of the community is much greater.
Yeah.
One last thing. You're involved with a foundation called the Maynard Foundation, right? Is it Maynard?
No, No, Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation.
No, I'm thinking of the other one, the journal,
Oh, the Maynard Institute.
the Maynard Institute. Would you just tell us about that? Because I think what you were telling me earlier is worth hearing. And
Okay, so the Maynard Institute was founded by Robert Maynard, Bob Maynard, and his wife Nancy Maynard back in, I believe, 1979, along with, I think there were 10 other people who were part of it, but Bob and Nancy were at the forefront of it. And Bob is a legendary journalist who worked many years at the Washington Post and other places. And he ended up, I don't know exactly the career path, but he ended up at the Oakland Tribune. And at the time, I was in California as well. I believe I was working at the Fresno Bee. And I met Bob, and I was impressed with Bob. I mean, he was a visionary, quick to laugh. Nancy, just a real classy lady. And he wanted to own a daily newspaper. And he worked with Gannett. I'm trying to think of the gentleman's name. Al Newhart, who was the chairman.
oh yeah,
And
yeah.
Al was big on diversity. And he put his money where his mouth was. I mean, he was great about bringing in diverse staffers, leaders, and he invested in the Oakland Tribune and negotiated so that Bob would become the owner. So he was the owner of the Oakland Tribune. So one of the things that Bob, and I certainly recall this, would hear hiring managers and editors talk about is they can't find people of color for their newsrooms. And so Bob, he set about, him and his wife and others, to creating this institute to train the journalists to take that excuse away that you can't find the talent. And he was very successful. Today, the Maynard Institute continues. They have produced between 1,200 and 1,500 journalists all across America. You see a lot of senior leaders of color in various newspapers, TV stations, radio stations. They went through the training at the Maynard Institute. Currently, I work with them on the Maynard 200 program, which is a program that was started, I believe, in 2018, was funded by, I believe, the Knight Foundation and also an individual. I can't think of his name right now. I'm embarrassed that I can't. But anyway, the focus was to take journalists who wanted to transition, or who had been laid off, into more senior level positions, which morphed into the executive leadership program. I'm the executive in residence for that particular program. The entrepreneurial program, which Dixon Louie out of the Bay Area in California, he's a professor and a writer. He oversees that. The storytelling group, which are journalists who want to improve their skills on storytelling. Aaron Glantz oversees that. Aaron is a Pulitzer-winning reporter. And finally, the frontline managers, which that training's been in place for a couple of years. And John X. Miller from the Dallas Morning News and also ESPN, he oversees that. So it's a very competitive program where people apply to participate. It doesn't cost them anything. We bring trainers from around the country, different disciplines. It is a year-long program that includes an individual mentor along with 2 one-week sessions. Typically, they're in person. During COVID, they were via Zoom. This year, because of economics, it'll be in person 1 week and Zoom a second week. But just an excellent program. And a lot of the graduates come back and serve as panelists and, mentors. So very proud to be a part of it. It's been very successful.
That's fantastic. And wanted you to say that because I wanted people to feel like that their impression of what journalism is that they get from the television or from social media is not the whole picture. And
No, not at all.
and that if you're a person of color who has an interest in journalism or has an interest in writing or has an interest in their community and you want to be able to make a difference, you know, journalism may be a route for you, and maybe you know, this is a place to begin to find some people that you can associate with, where you're at your sense of shared identity about what you want and what you want to do can nurture that part of you. So I think it's you know, to me it's exciting. I think what we'll see coming, Virgil, is a greater level of accountability to the individual podcaster, in that because they will find that there are more people who are looking at them, and they're scrutinizing what they're writing. I feel it as a blogger who's been blogging since 2004 and now writing on Substack. I feel that sense of that oversight that the public provides, and I appreciate that, and that's really going to be important for us going forward in the future.
Absolutely. And let me just say this about Maynard is that, you know, my philosophy, and you know this, is diversity includes everyone. And so we take everyone. So we have people of color, we have, you know, folks, Caucasians from the dominant group participating as well. So the table is open for everyone. So I just want to make that point clear as well.
That's great. Well, Virgil, thank you for your time today. It's great to reconnect with you. I have a deep appreciation for you and gratitude for the influence that you've had on my life and my work, and enjoyed being a partner with you in some of the projects that we did years ago. And thank you for being with us today. And thank you, everyone, for watching. And I hope that you've picked up a new idea or two that will maybe alter your own perception of what's going on in the world, maybe inspire you to take some initiative to do something that makes a difference in your local community. Whatever that may be, I encourage you to do so. And also subscribe, hit the like button. And if you have a question or a comment, please leave that. And again, thank you, Virgil, for being with us. And we will see you all the next time here on the Eddy Network podcast.